Hello and welcome to British English with Alexandre. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Okay, here we are again. Onwards and upwards with our advanced grammar in use. Specifically talking, if you are new to the channel, about that advanced grammar in use from Cambridge University by Martin Hewings. This is a self-study reference and practice book for advanced learners of English. We're moving on with our lessons. If you are new to the channel, you're gonna have an excellent experience through that method of studying English. Here we're studying English. We're learning grammar, British grammar, by reading it out loud, explaining grammar, explaining pronunciation, explaining all the things that are necessary for you to understand advanced British English grammar. Okay, before we get started, please, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to the channel so we can help English learners, English students to read fluent fast, increasing their vocabulary to thousands and thousands of words, learning connected speech, elision, alliteration, all the things that you might learn naturally by studying like that. Okay, I have a plan to be publishing units of grammar. It's going to be something around 100 lessons where you learn all the patterns inside our grammar, our advanced English grammar. Okay, this is unit 22, so let's keep up the good work. Okay, let's move on with the lesson. We're considering in that lesson the passive sentences. So we're talking about forming passive sentences. 1. I should say to you, you should never underestimate any of those lessons. Okay, moving on. This is section A. Here we talk about verbs. Verbs such as give take both a direct object, we call it DO, direct object, and an indirect object, IO, indirect object, in two patterns. For example, we're gonna call it V plus IO plus DO, or V plus DO plus preposition plus IO. These verbs have two corresponding passives. For example, in the active form, V plus IO plus DO, or V plus DO plus preposition plus IO, and its corresponding passive. For example, Alice gave us that vase. Alice gave us that vase. So we've got Alice, which is the subject. She gave. This is the verb. She gave us that vase. This is the indirect object. She gave us what? That vase. And then the direct object. So the VIO plus DO, in that case, Alice gave us that vase. Alice gave us what? That vase. The direct object is that vase, and us is the indirect object. So the passive for that pattern is, if Alice gave us that vase, we were given that vase. We were given that vase. You might say, you might mention the person who gave us the vase. We were given that vase by Alice, or you might say only we were given that vase if it's not important to say who gave us that vase. Okay, in the second pattern, Alice gave that vase to us. Alice gave that vase to us. So gave is the verb, that vase is the direct object. That vase is the direct object. Then we've got to, which is the preposition, and then the indirect object. Alice gave that vase to us. So to form the passive in a pattern like that, we say that vase was given to us by Alice. We might also say that vase was given us, or that vase was given us by Alice. You might use it to or not. You might omit it. You might omit the agent responsible for giving the vase to us. So we have three ways to say. Again, that vase was given to us by Alice. That vase was given to us, or that vase was given us, without mentioning Alice. Okay, so for those patterns, the first pattern, we have the first example, and for the second pattern, we've got the second example. Okay, moving on. Also, we might apply those patterns to form the passive form with those verbs: to award, hand, land, offer, send, throw. Those are given verbs. Given verbs. Given verbs. And also, we might use those patterns with ask, read, and teach. Those are telling verbs. Telling verbs. So for telling verbs and for giving verbs, we use those patterns. Okay, let's move on with the lesson. The passive form you choose depends on which is more appropriate in a particular context. If we specify an agent, this follows by at the end of the clause, like we've seen in the previous examples. By, always we use by the agent. Note that in informal contexts too can be left out in the second passive pattern. Okay, verbs that can't be followed by io plus do in the active have only one of these passive forms. For example, active V for verb, direct object plus preposition plus indirect object io. So for example, he explained the problem to me. He, the subject, explained in the past simple, past tense. He explained, this is the verb in the past. He explained what? He explained the problem. He explained something. This is the direct object. He explained the problem plus preposition to. He explains the problem to me. Me is the indirect object. So, in a pattern like that, the passive is constructed like this. He explained the problem to me. Explained what? The problem. So, the problem was explained to me. The problem was explained to me. When to use the active or when to use the passive, it depends on the focus. If you want to focus on the fact that he explained the problem to me, that's okay. But if you want to focus on the thing, so you might say the problem was explained to me, and it's unnecessary to explain who did the action of explaining. Okay, moving on. We also use that pattern with the verbs: to announce, demonstrate, describe, introduce, mention, propose, report, suggest. Those are reporting verbs. Okay, moving on to section B. Verbs followed by object plus complement in the active. Sorry about that. In the active, you have one passive form. For example, active V plus object plus complement. They elected her president. They elected the verb. They elected her object. They elected her what? President. Oh, okay. This is a complement. They elected her president. The passive is constructed like that. She was elected the president. They elected her president. She was elected the president. We also used that pattern also with the verbs to appoint, declare, make, nominate, vote. Those are to do with giving a particular position. And also with call, name, and title. Those are naming verbs. Okay, moving on to section C. Some verbs that are followed by object plus bare infinitive, an infinitive without to, in the active are followed by a to infinitive in the passive. For example, again, the pattern active. In the active, we've got the verb plus object plus bare infinitive. They have made him return the money. They have made him return the money. He was obliged to give the money back. They have made verb, him, object, and then the bare infinitive. Not they have made him to return the money. No, they have made him return the money. So we've got the bare infinitive here. That is an infinitive without to. And when it is like that, the passive gets he has been made to return the money. He has been made to return the money. He was obliged to return the money anyway. We use that pattern also with the verbs feel, hear, help, also object plus to infinitive, observe, and see. Okay, moving on. Section D. Transitive 2 and 3 word verbs. 2 word verbs and 3 word verbs. If we were to break it down. 2 word verbs and 3 word verbs. We say transitive 2 and 3 word verbs. Some have passive forms. Let's double check. For the active and passive ways, let's check that out. Ella looked after him. Ella looked after him. Passive, he was looked after. He was looked after. If you want to mention the agent, you should use he was looked after by Ella. He was looked after by Ella. Also with the verbs carry out, that means put into practice, disapprove of, hold over, which means to delay something, hold over, to delay, and talk down to, that means to patronize. Okay, some are not used in the passive. For example, we came up against a problem. We came up against a problem. We came up against what? We came up against a problem. For that pattern, there's no passive. Okay, we're talking about a 3-word verb. Come up against something. This is a phrasal verb, a 3-word verb. In that case, there's no passive. Also with those verbs, brush up on, a 3-word verb again. Brush up on, that means to revise. For example, you might brush up on your English, you might brush up on your German, you might brush up on your Portuguese and stuff like that. Also with the verbs cast your mind back, try to remember, cast your mind back, try to remember. Get something down, that means to write something. get something down. And take after. Take after means to resemble. Take after, resemble. Okay, moving on. Some can be only used in the passive with certain senses. For example, in the active, they put out the fire. In its corresponding passive, we say the fire was put out. They put out the fire was put out. But I put out a hand to steady myself. I put out a hand to steady myself. I put out a hand to steady myself. There's no passive for that verb. Also, passive possible meaning / or no passive meaning. For call someone up. That means to order to join the army or telephone. Call someone back. For call someone back, that means ask to return or telephone. Let in, allow into a place, or allow rain, etc. in. Or let out, allow to leave, or let out a sound, So for those verbs, we pay that special attention. Okay, and that brings us to the end of that lesson. I hope you've enjoyed. If you have any doubt, please go over it again. Do not underestimate any of those lessons, because those passive sentences are used all the time, and you've got to know the rules to understand the proper English. That's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed the lesson. Please subscribe to the lesson, share the content with your friends, English learners all over the world. Have a lovely day or night. Cheers.